Hello, welcome back to another episode of Somewhere Between a Film and TV podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Parra, and number one, thank you so much for listening and watching. Number two, if you could, please down below, like, comment, and subscribe. What did you think of Kevin Williamson's first directorial standpoint in the Scream franchise? Scream 7. Scream 7, I have a lot to say, but I will go ahead and get into it here in a second. But what is this about? When a new Ghostface killer emerges in the quiet town where Sydney has built a new life, her darkest fears are realized as her daughter becomes the next target. Determined to protect her family, she must face the horrors of her past and put it to an end. So, this is, like we said, the 7th installment in this franchise. It is Kevin Williamson's first time in the director's chair. Typically, whenever he was co-writing with Wes Craven, he was always just relegated to writer. But right before this was, I'm sure we got to address it, there was the controversy before this with Melissa Barrera being fired and let go, as well as Jenna Ortega claiming that she had scheduling problems, which, I mean, chalk that up to if that's legit or not, I'm not really sure. But there are a couple of people that are from the previous two that are in this, and they were welcome additions for sure. But really getting into this, what I want to tell you is this has full spoilers. If you haven't seen this yet and you are a diehard fan of this and you never want to know who the killers are, you don't want to know what the fan servicey stuff is in this, I highly suggest you do not finish this video until you watch the movie. Until then, like this and come back to it. But I overall want to start this by saying my own opinions on the Scream franchise, and it's one of the horror franchises. It's honestly one of the franchises, period, that's highly influential to me. I think that it really has influenced a lot of my own writing in life. The horror comedy, the meta aspects of it, I think are brilliant and incredibly smart. And honestly, 5 and 6, the ones with Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera in the leads, I think are two of the best in the series. 5 and 6, especially 6. I think 6 knew that in order to lay out groundwork for it to feel a little bit fresh, it was in a different setting in New York instead. And a lot of the set pieces in that were really unique to the franchise and really different. With all that being said, if you are comfortable with the familiar, if you are comfortable with fan service and nothing else and playing it safe and doing absolutely nothing new, then you're going to love Scream 7. With this movie, did I love it, did I hate it, or am I somewhere between on it? And I got to come at this with the perspective of I want to repeat. I am a huge fan of this franchise. I even like 3 quite a bit, if that tells you anything. 1 is perfect. 2, I think, is perfect. 3 is good. 4 is great. 5 and 6, I think, are amazing movies. I hated this. I sat there the whole time kind of like in denial about this. Sure, there are a couple things that are positive in here, and we're going to go over them. But this was a massive letdown. This was a massive disappointment on essentially every level. It has all of the hallmarks of the nostalgia bait type of thing that I do not like. This, if I were to rate like an equivalent of this, I did not like Rise of Skywalker at all, the 9th Star Wars movie. And this felt a lot like Scream's version of that in particular. It plays it so safe and doesn't do a single new thing with any of the characters. And even the ones that are brought back feel like they don't have a whole lot to do. Neve Campbell is back in this, and if you remember the controversy behind her not being in 6, it was because they offered her a really low sum of money to come back for it, which, yes, was unfair considering she is the face of this franchise. But this movie cannot help but they must have paid her a lot, because there's a lot of like sort of jabbing at Neve Campbell not being in the 6th one by them continuously bringing up, oh, it's not the same without you there. Oh, you should have been there. It was brutal, which almost kind of like implies that like 6 was bad, which is hilarious considering how cocky this movie seems to be about that, considering that 5 and 6 are miles and miles above this one in terms of quality. But it was one of those things where you can feel I guess not a writer's anger, considering Kevin Williamson's pretty involved with all of these in the first place, but something was there, especially considering the meta commentary that these movies have. But if we're going to get into the positives at the very least first, I think that Neve Campbell is giving it her all here. I think that her being brought back isn't a case of, let's say, any of the I hated that I Know What You Did Last Summer reboot cool thing from last year. But Sarah Michelle Gellar was wasted in that, in her random cameo that she had. Here, Neve Campbell isn't. I think that she has a lot to do. She's basically the anchor again here, and man, do they put Neve Campbell's character through it again. Sidney Prescott really just cannot catch a break. And it was weird, though, considering her husband Joel McHale is in this. It's just weirdly cast. He doesn't get to do any of his usual, like, comedic thing. I love Community a lot. It's one of my favorite shows. And he's relegated to, like, husband who doesn't do anything, and he's a really bad cop, and that's it. He gets knocked out a bunch of times. But Neve Campbell is good in this. And as far as this goes, I think that for a slasher movie, the kills in this are very good. Really good, to be honest with you. A lot of the set pieces, I was kind of tricked by this movie early on. It has a really good set piece at the beginning with, I believe his name is Jimmy Tatro. He's from one of my favorite shows that was on Netflix that was very brief. It was a mockumentary that was on there for 2 seasons. He's incredible in season 1 of that. But it was this whole setup of this like really kind of obnoxious horror fan who goes to visit one of those like themed Airbnbs. And as you know, the meta movies that are in this are the Stab movies, which are essentially the Scream movies, but played into that really like fake sort of theatrical version of real life events that they, glamorize to an extent and really don't treat with the proper respect, like horror movies do with some of the real life events. And irony being, this feels like one of the Stab movies that they would be critiquing and making fun of themselves. This has relegated itself to also being just one of those and being default in the sense of also not having anything to say, which is super weird for a Scream movie, but we'll get to that. The kills, though, I do want to emphasize, like I said, they're good. There are a couple that are honestly pretty inspired. I really like the one at the beginning where it's this set piece with this Airbnb where there's these like fake ghost face animatronics that are motion censored. And obviously that can set up a lot of really, really cool stuff. And it does. They do utilize that really well to the point where I was like, okay, this is a really good cold open. Which, if you are a fan of the Scream movies, much like I am, you know the formula here. You know the thing. But the thing about the Scream movies is the more they go on, the more subversive and self-analyzing they get. They are supposed to be sequels that expand on themselves by also evaluating Hollywood horror as a whole. And the 5 kind of critiqued the whole A24 elevated Babadook horror stuff as well, which I really liked. But here it seems to want to critique, I think, AI and deepfakes, but doesn't really do anything with that. The nostalgia play in this one is that they bring Matthew Lillard back. And I love Matthew Lillard. His character is really good in this. But the way that it's executed is really cheap and really poor and my least favorite kind of fan service because it's about this whole thing about deepfakes and using old killers and hiding behind the mask of old killers on these like FaceTime calls, and which is like a clever enough idea. It reminds me of the voice changer in the third one. And also like 6, the whole thing is supposed to be the killer reveals are a little bit different each time, but here it's just not expanded on in any kind of way. But like I said, the positive, like the cool kill sequences that are in this are the one that there's this cool one with the Airbnb, like I said. There's a really clever one with the stage play that they're putting on. McKenna Grace is in this pretty briefly, and I like her role in it. She kind of has that delegated thing of, in each one of these, there's always a sort of up-and-coming Scream queen that makes a bit of a cameo. Sarah Michelle Gellar was in number 2. There was also Samara Weaving at the beginning of the 6th one. It does play into the typical honoring of modern horror that Scream likes to do. And McKenna Grace, I really like that she is essentially the Sarah Michelle Gellar of this one, where she's in part of the friend group. And the way that it's set up pretty early on is this kind of like her being attached to these ropes while she's being flown up and down in the theater. And the setup for the kill is, to be honest with you, really inventive. And one of the more clever aspects of this movie. The ghost face in this really seems to like to revel in the deaths that they are putting on. There's even one later on that I thought was like insane, where they kill this kid that's obsessed with true crime by sticking his head through a bar tap. And I thought that was really clever, because then the beer starts spouting out of its mouth and you're like, that's absurd. And there's also a really cool set piece right after the whole one at the play where Ghostface is stabbing them through the wall. And to be honest with you, it's really tense and it works really well. But, and yes, there is a but here with this, I don't go to the Scream movies for just the kills. If I did, then I think that would be one thing. But these movies are incredibly smart. And they are so smart to the point where I'm curious what happened here. It feels like somebody who is a fan of this franchise didn't quite grasp what the Scream movies themselves are, but they were still fans of them and still made their own Scream movie and did the whole, like, honestly, no, to be honest with you, this sounds like Scream 5. If you remember Richie, Jack Quaid's character, the guy from The Boys that's in the fifth one, he wanted to put on his whole, like, they wanted to do the whole, they were making fun of The Last Jedi thing where it's like, no, you guys got this wrong. We're going to make our own sequel and we're going to do it right. This feels like their version of that, ironically enough. Like, they started to play into it. And it makes me wonder if Kevin Williamson is a smart enough writer that I'm like, did he intentionally tank his own movie? What happened here? Because even the beginning, it starts with this metaphorical thing about burning down everything to the ground. They burned down the original house, the original Woodsboro house, Stumacher's house at the beginning of this. And he says, I'm going to burn this all down to the ground. And part of you is like, okay, that's an interesting concept. It reminds me of the sixth one where he says, who gives a fuck about movies? And that they don't really actually care about that motive anymore, which I thought was brilliant in that one. Here, if it really bothered to expand on its concept of anarchism, about like disrespecting the legacy of everything, that would be one thing. But it doesn't do that. Instead, it says that and then plays into nostalgia for the next 2 hours. So I'm kind of like, okay, what are we doing here then? And the whole thing about these movies is that they're supposed to be critique and commentary on horror of the modern day. But this can't do that because it even undercuts itself whenever the characters from 5 and 6 that show up, Jasmine Savoy Brown and Mason Gooding, which are Chad and Mindy, who I think are really great characters. They play that whole kind of comedic relief. They know all the rules of all the horror stuff. They're there to be like the analysis experts for all of that. When they show up with Courtney Cox, Gale Weathers, it's a breath of fresh air, because I'm like, oh my God, finally, some people that are from the previous ones. And then they do breathe a little bit of life into this because they have a really good, solid amount of chemistry with each other. And to be honest with you, a lot of their dialogue is just really funny. And they're really likable actors. But the whole issue with them to begin with is, in each one of these movies, there is something that needs to happen. They need to all get put into a room, all of the suspects, and then they all need to prod and pry and go over one by one, why would you be the suspect? Why would you be the suspect? Because the Scream movies are also simultaneously murder mysteries while also being this like horror meta commentary analysis slasher thing, which is why I really do love these so much. They're really clever and really smart. But whenever Jasmine Savoy Brown's character starts to break down the rules of this one in particular, the movie itself cuts her off. It says, no, we're not doing that anymore. Which makes me wonder, okay, so we're just playing it straight then. If we're going to do that, why make this? Why make a playing it straight slasher movie when we know that's not what these are to begin with? It's really weird for me to see that this is the path that this franchise has gone down. And every single one of these movies, every movie ever, I try to go in with zero expectation. But the thing is, I think it's a little bit difficult when I do hold this franchise in such a high regard to begin with. So me being irritated and aggravated at this movie is primarily because it seems to have lost the plot with itself and what it's doing, which I find really just highly disappointing. And even bringing back some of the legacy characters. I like Matthew Lillard a lot. I think that like Scooby-Doo 1 and 2, genuinely, I can't critique those. Those are like two of my favorite movies, and I just love Matthew Lillard a lot. And I really like him in the first one. And I know that there was this whole like truthing thing about his character that he never died, and they do kind of utilize that as part of the subplot here. But they really don't do anything with him. They let him really thrive in some of like the FaceTime calls stuff he does, but what that undercuts is the original Ghostface narrator, the voice of Ghostface, and he doesn't really get to be in this one a whole lot. And that voice is intimidating, and you don't really get to fully hear that voice really anything be done with it. To be honest with you, even right off the bat with this movie, I think that it felt off. It felt odd. I know that Kevin Williamson isn't a consistent director in terms of like not consistent in quality, in that he literally has not made a lot of stuff. But typically I find with these movies, they're all fast paced to a certain degree. They all really move at a clip, but this one really lagged, and it felt really just dragged on, especially with the new final girl here, or not final girl, I guess, because a lot of them are still alive at the end of this. To be honest with you, this movie has next to no stakes. It kind of, the one thing I did like, I'll get to in a second, but Neve Campbell's daughter in this, I did not like at all. I found her really whiny and really annoying, and to be honest with you, didn't expand on her character in any kind of way other than there's a moment early on, and this is where I caught on with some of what the problem is. I don't mind nostalgia. I do like fan service. I really, if it's utilized well. But the type of fan service that's happening here is, I believe the actress's name is Isabel May. Neve Campbell, Sidney Prescott's daughter, is sitting on the bed and the window's open. If you remember the first one literally at all, what do you think is going to happen? It's beat for beat the same. The guy climbs through the window, and he starts talking to her, and he acts like really kind of off and suspicious. So you start to pick up that, oh, maybe he's one of them. And that's just one of the many instances of like, I don't need beats repeated from the previous movies. It feels that's kind of what whenever they show the stab movies in these, that's what those are for. To make fun of the movies that do that to begin with in the first place. So it's why I'm kind of like, did Kevin Williamson, did he just phone this one in? Did he really need to write this one fast because of whatever studio mandate there was? Whatever it was, I was just trying to find reason the whole time. And to be honest with you, I did want to come at this unbiased. I wanted to come at this with the sense of like, all right, I am upset about the whole Jenna Ortega and Melissa Barrera thing. That's one thing. But I could not stop thinking about the fact of what the sixth one, the ending, set up with that, where it was an inversion of the entire slasher genre, where it was going to be that Melissa Barrera's character couldn't help but end up falling into what her dad was. And maybe we could have followed the perspective, the POV of the killer having been the person that was avoiding it the whole time. There was like rumors of them like sort of teasing that with Sidney Prescott. I'm glad they never did that with her, but I believe her name is, it's Sam and Tara, right? And those characters, it was just set up for that to be you following the killer's perspective for once. And it was going to be the end of that. And 5, 6, and 7, honestly, sounded like they would have been a really great trilogy overall and an overall inversion on the whole franchise itself. But instead, what we got, because of all the background stuff, was this. And even the whole thing about the specific tropes that Scream sets up for itself. There always needs to be a formula of some sort, but the formula typically gets bent and manipulated a little bit to skew whatever's going on right now in terms of the horror landscape. And what this one did was just play into all the stuff that you don't like in the first place. I Know What You Did Last Summer. Unfortunately, this felt like that to me. I did not like that movie at all, and I didn't really like this one at all either. And it's really just such a letdown to say that because of how much I think that this franchise means to me and how much I hold it in such a high regard to begin with in the first place, that watching this was really irritating and really frustrating. And to be honest with you, typically, if I didn't mention this earlier, which I believe I did, I really also love Scooby-Doo a whole lot. Like the whole murder mystery, the whole unmasking thing, I love it all. each one of these, it needs to have that requisite, okay, who's under the mask portion of it, like Scooby-Doo. And the motives for the killers in this one made zero sense. It was convoluted to the point of being nonsensical, and the whole motive behind it was almost kind of like, all right, I don't even understand why I even watched you guys do all this to begin with. One of the family friends, like the neighbor of Sidney Prescott, it turns out that she's one of the killers, and her reasoning, she goes on, like, you know how it's basically inverse whodunit, where they're like, oh, I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you, you know, that kind of thing. But instead of, let's say, like Benoit Blanc in Knives Out, he's the one giving the monologue. It's always the villains. They're why they did this, why they did that. In this one, I could not follow at all, but that's because the reason made no sense. It was like, oh, Sydney, you weren't in New York, which is, again, another jab at the sixth one. And she was like, it's not the same without you. I'm like, okay, I understand what you're doing. You're saying that the movie, the one right before this, doesn't count because Sydney wasn't in it. But she was hardly in 5 either. She was in it, but to an extent that it didn't focus on her. They kind of used her as just like oh, she's knowledgeable and she knows about this, let's go and visit her. And they really used Neve Campbell to a sparing degree that it made sense for her to be in it and for Gale Weathers to be in it, but not to overtake the whole thing, because they wanted to lend this to new characters. And I thought that 5 and 6 balanced that back and forth really well. This one, like I said, plays it so safe that it goes straight back to Neve Campbell. And to be honest with you, Sidney Prescott doesn't even really act like Sidney Prescott. There's a scene in this where her daughter's in danger, and there's this whole thing, and it's the whole idea of showing and not telling. They keep telling us that Sidney Prescott is this brave woman, that she does all of these things and goes out of her way. And to be honest, yes, she is. I've seen the other movies. But in this one, she doesn't do it at all. There's even a scene where her daughter, like I said, is fending for herself. And Sidney Prescott stops in the middle of the road and watches like the live cam footage instead of like running to help her daughter, which just felt super out of character for me about this character to begin with. And I was like, no, I don't think, not that I'm like the one writing this, and I would like to think that Kevin Williamson knows his own characters better than I do, but I don't think she would act like this in this case. I really don't perceive her in that way. And to be honest with you, a lot of the characters sort of felt like this. Gale Weathers has nothing to do in this. Like, I understand bringing Courtney Cox back. She's a legacy character, but she gets nothing to do. She has this one scene where she shows up because the one sort of inversion here on the Scream twist is they reveal some random guy is the Ghostface killer like 45 minutes into the movie, which is a pretty cool idea because you're like, who is this? And they kill one of them kind of early. I liked that. But the thing about that is what I thought it was setting up is I thought that the whole concept was going to be that it was going to be a bunch of Ghostface killers. I thought that they were going to be taking a bunch of them out of the mental ward that they were saying that Matthew Lillard's character was at, and deep faking them to pretend to be this person because they're mentally unsound, which I was like, that's a pretty cool idea. But then it's not that at all. It's just the guy that runs the mental hospital to begin with, and then the neighbor. And again, I could not follow either of what their motives were at all, to the point where it's like, all right, parts of this movie had me in terms of being like, okay, parts of this are entertaining. A lot of the chase scenes are well executed. I'm not going to lie. It's the best thing that this movie has going for it. But again, it's such a letdown because the Scream movies have so much more going for them than just that. If this had been just that kind of series, maybe I'd be easier on it, but I expect so much more from this particular series. And overall, one other thing I really did not enjoy, I love seeing some of the older killers back in this briefly, like Laurie Metcalf, and I really liked seeing Dewey back for the 10 seconds he's in this. What I thought was hilarious is they even tried getting Mikey Madison back, but apparently, I don't know how much I buy into this. She said, oh, sorry, my camera's broken. And they said, try the back one. And she's like, no, that one's broken too. I don't know if she just didn't want to be in this or what. But I am glad that at least 5 and 6 can maybe like push themselves away from this one a little bit further, even though 2 of the characters that are from those are in this, which is funny that them showing up, as much as I really, really love Sidney Prescott and Gale, it just felt like, okay, finally, like something just refreshing for them to be here for. Because Also, this movie's kind of humorless. It doesn't, weirdly enough, it doesn't have any sort of sharp anything going for it. You would think that it'd be a commentary on the Scream franchise itself, but it just isn't. And to be honest with you, it's got nothing to say. It has nothing up its sleeve. It really is about nothing, which is unfortunate because these movies are more than that to me. And overall, I'll put it this way. Like I said, I really, really respect the first 6 of these, even 3, even the one that people consider like the black sheep one. I like that one. And here, this is the first time I'm ever going to give one of these a negative review, and I'm really sad about it. Honestly, I sat there last night in my car for a little bit, and I was like, well, damn, this sucks. And I was in really heavy denial about it, but it is what it is. And going forward, if they make another one of these, I hope that either they take more time or that they don't push this out randomly and that it's going to be about something next time. And unfortunately, I know that they're going to pivot this into the Sidney Prescott's daughter character, make her interesting. I didn't find anything about her interesting in this one. The whole thing about like even Sidney's leather jacket from what was that, Scream 2? I'm just not somebody that's like, oh my god, the iconic jacket. Like that's lame. Do more, do better is essentially what I'm saying. Yeah, guys, this was a massive letdown for me on all fronts. There's a couple things I liked about it, and that was the kills, but again, that is not enough. And I liked some of the characters that came back, even if some of them were heavily underutilized. Honestly, all of them except Sidney, and Sidney was one of the saving graces for this. Out of 5, I am gonna give this 2 out of 5 stars. Yeah, this was not good at all. And I'm sorry. What did you guys think of Scream 7? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Or are you somewhere between on it? I'm very curious about everyone's opinions. It is very poorly received, but it made a lot of money. And to be honest with you, some of the people in my audience seemed really into it to the point where I was kind of deceiving myself a little bit. But no, I can't. Up next is going to be, I believe, The Bride, the new Frankenstein-like spin-off hybrid thing, as well as Hoppers, the new Pixar movie that comes out this week. I've heard great things about Hoppers, and I'm very curious about The Bride. Until then, thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time.